Hello, I'm Henry, and I read a book. I read this book, Flanimals, The Day of the Bletchling by Ricky Gervais and illustrated by Rob Steen, and I would like to talk about it, please. Apologies for the change in setup. The living room is currently in a sort of transitionary phase when it comes to furniture, so for this week, and this week only, we are not Henry in the chair, we are Henry on a sofa. The Flood from Halo, the Tyranids from Warhammer 40k, the Annihilation Wave from Marvel Comics. These things have a lot in common, but one thing they share is that I am willing to bet a significant sum of money that Ricky Gervais has no idea what they are or that they even exist. And yet, he has somehow written a book that hits the exact beats of those stories. That might seem weird, and it would be if Ricky Gervais just wrote an alien swarm apocalypse story, but framed within his series of nonsense animals, it is less so. This book series has grown and developed massively from where it started. It began as a very simple handbook of creatures, just a fun little art project more than anything else. The second book expanded on the world building and went into detail on the speculative biology, and the third book emphasizes evolution, looking at Flanimal origins and how we ended up where we are with underblenges and swog monglets. For it now to become this dark, bleak Armageddon does track. I think I've mentioned in all my videos of the series so far that there is an underlying darkness to the world Ricky Gervais has created. It's played for comedy, but it is still there, whether it's descriptions of how violently certain Flanimals attack each other, or how it feels like the world itself is out to get these animals, or, as we've seen from our survivability tier list, simply the cursed existences that some of these Flanimals have, being so useless and self-sabotaging they would just die immediately. And there have been hints to this Bletchling in the last few books as well, even showing it in the third one. So this being our culmination, this is the last book in the series, by the way. This being what everything has been building to does make sense. Ricky Gervais and Rob Steen have built this world. It is their prerogative to burn it all down. Okay, so how does this world fall? Blugs. This book introduces the Flanimal equivalent of insects. Some proper speculative biology raises its head again here. We get how these blugs function, with a figure on their nervous system, a figure showing how some work after being cut in half, and an instance of their capacity for cooperation coordination. And it's one of these blugs in particular that brings about the end of the world. The Bletchling. The Bletchling is a super blug, as Chapter 2 states. It is a creature of pure evil capable of reproducing at a rapid rate, corrupting other Flanimals to madness, paralysing fear, inducing illness with its buzzing, and burning with its blood. We see from one of the figures we are given of the Bletchling that it has, quote, pure hate cells in its brain. This sounds like something even a space marine would struggle to deal with. Let me just read this bit to you. The ground wriggled and writhed. A vomboid stench punged the air. One whiff of the giant insectoid made Flanimals spew and moan across the land. The Bletchlings were on their way. That is pretty sinister, isn't it? If it wasn't for a few nonsense words, that would sound like a passage from Lovecraft. Actually, I think the nonsense words make it sound more like Lovecraft, to be honest. So it begins with a smell. The Bletchlings hatch from their dormant underground eggs and take flight. When they come across another Flanimal, they vomit caustic goo from their goo valve that we saw in the previous figure, which dissolves their prey and they simply drink them up. Does this brutal apocalypse stop Ricky Gervais from slipping in a little bit of snide atheism? It does not. No Flanimal was safe. No Flanimal had any defense. They needed a miracle to survive. They needed a higher power to save them. They all prayed to Grob, but nothing happened. Nothing happened because there is no Grob. They all felt so stupid, believing in something so ridiculous and far-fetched. Legendary. Some Flanimals, like the lone figure, launched some feeble initial counterattacks, but were just dissolved too. And then the war begins, like something out of, well, Halo, Warhammer or Marvel. And I'll tell you, Flanimal warfare is something else. In the best way, it's kind of like a kid playing with their toys. All of the unique characteristics of the Flanimals get employed in combat scenarios, like honks using their loud noise, or munchfuddlers throwing baby manimblers into the air where they become adults and attack. It's brutal, it's epic, it's grand, it's dire, it's a lost cause. The number of the Bletchlings is just too great. And Chapter 4 handily answers the question if anything survives. Everything is gone and we get scenes of utter devastation. But it does end on a poignant little bit of doing good with the time we have. Quite a heartfelt little message at the end of all this nonsense and death. Oh, and maybe the hope that things can rebuild. There you are, how the Flanimal world ended. Climactic to say the least, and not unlike the insect plagues of grimdark science fiction. It's very cool how, as I said in the overview, Ricky Gervais has has hit the same beats as those stories. The hopelessness, the insurmountable odds, the waves and waves of enemies, the grotesque natures of those enemies. It's kind of uncanny. It makes me think Ricky Gervais might have done a couple of 40k lore deep dives. Although this book came out in 2007, I don't think those 4-hour videos were around then. Okay, let's now have one final look at the Flanimal survivability tier list, because with the introduction of blogs, we get a few more things to throw on there. In the previous videos in this series, on top of looking at the themes and the creativity on show, we've also been going through each of the Flanimals individually and deciding whether any of them can actually survive, or if they're just so nonsense they just couldn't function. We did this by assigning each one of them a tier, those tiers being yes, they would survive, maybe they could survive, and no, they won't survive. The previous totals were 36 yeses, 6 maybes, and 19 no's. And I know that seeing as all the Flanimals die in this book, this might seem kind of pointless, but we've got these blugs, so we might as well look at them. The Zub, leading with some nonsense for the road. Zubs, like Bants, are a specialised form of Vap. They are fatter and more bumbloid, but this is no excuse. Nothing hindering its survivability there. Yes. The Vap, kind of like a wasp, better to stay away from it, but still a yes. The Horde Shuffler, blind, should stay in dark places where this disadvantage doesn't matter, but because it is blind, it just ends up out in the open, in the light. A Sitting Duck, no. The Monk Worm, it can't move away from danger quick enough, but does have the defense mechanism I showed earlier. However, this defense mechanism will result in its death. No. The Frag Dryer, buzzes about a bit intensely, but nothing that'll hurt it. Yes, the Mauve lands on other Flanimals, something that is not received well, but they don't try to swat it, they just try to shake it off, which doesn't work. So yes. The Bant, a social creature that works together for the betterment of the whole. Yes. The let's use the scientific names for these two. The Isn't and the Is. The Isn't mimics the Is because the Is violent. A very similar adaptation to real-world animals. I'd say both of these are yeses. And that's it for all the new Flanimals in this book. So let's total that up. 7 yeses, 0 maybes, and 2 nos. Bringing our final totals up to 43 yeses, 6 maybes, and 21 nos. That is a final survivability percentage of 61%. Despite these being nonsense comedy books not to be taken seriously at all, when you do take it seriously, over half of it isn't nonsense at all. Next, we'd look at the expansion of the Flanimal world. However, as I mentioned in the last video, it's probably about as expanded as we could possibly get. Despite the nonsense madness, the Flanimal world is a lot like our own, with similar biomes and climates and geology. It's just that the plants have eyes and 30% of the animals shouldn't exist. So any further mentions of aspects of this world would just be oversaturation, I think. Especially because the world ends in this book. No real need or inclination to flesh out a world if you know you're going to burn it down. This apocalypse, though, does tug at a question I hinted at in the previous video. What could this world have become if the day of the Bletchling didn't happen? The Moulons looked like they were going places. Would they have gone places? Well, with this book, we know the answer to that question and to the previous question. No, and nothing. The day of the Bletchling happens once every 1,000 years, we find out. The one depicted in this book is especially bad, causing complete planet-wide extinction. However, they have happened before and done serious damage before. So this seems to be some kind of built-in developmental cap on the Flanimal world. Just as things are getting somewhere, just as intelligence is developing, these bugs show up and wipe the slate clean. This is very similar to the Reapers in Mass Effect, who show up every 50,000 years and rend things down to primitive life again. So that's another cosmic horror extinction event that Ricky Gervais has somehow taken inspiration from, without, and I'm positive on this, knowing what it is. If it turns out he's some kind of massive Grimdark sci-fi fan, I'm going to look like a huge idiot. Now, just to give my quick thoughts on the book. As a finale to the Flanimal series, I don't think you can get more on brand than this. As I said earlier, all these books have a core of dark bleakness to them, and this book triples down on that. The horrifying, utter destruction of all the silly little Flanimals we've come to love over the last 3 books is exactly what I'd expect. And it works. And it works because of the maintenance of that tonal backbone. Because it's funny, and because it gives a proper endpoint to the world and story. We've learned about all these creatures across land and sea, and now they're all gone. End of story. Literally. The designs of the new creatures introed in this book are at the same high standards as all the others. The Bletchling specifically, it is arguably the most important Flanimal of all, so its design had to be on point. And it is doing absolutely everything it needs to. It's terrifying, it's gross, and it's so much more of both when there is a swarm of them. On that note, another shout out to Rob Steen is necessary here. Some of these pictures of battles and Flanimal armies, of the devastation and of the aftermath, are truly epic. I mean, this is the kind of thing you'd see on Warhammer box art, just with more Munty flumple. And despite its epic nature, this book is just as short as the others. You could read all of them in a day, in a few hours actually, and by the end you will have been through it. I don't know exactly what, but you will have definitely been through it. It has certainly been a journey going through this Flanimal series. I feel like we've gotten a real look into the mind of one Ricky Gervais, or a side of his mind that I don't think I knew existed. He is a writer, he is a comedian, he is obviously a creative bloke. It's just having all this stuff tucked away in there as well is a surprise, as I think I made clear in the first video in this series. To take the world building and the speculative biology so seriously is another thing I wouldn't expect, as we spoke about in the second video. And while I would absolutely expect a shot at religion, as we got in the third book, the medium of its delivery with detailed evolutionary biology of these weird little creatures, I would less so. And this last one, this Insectoid apocalypse straight out of Halo, is probably least expected of all. It all works though. I kind of want to know what the creative process was here. Did Rob Steen just keep up with Ricky's madness? Or did Ricky just come up with the names and ideas and Rob was the mental one? I would absolutely recommend this series to people of all ages. Kids will enjoy the funny names and colourful designs, and adults will enjoy the darkness and the nonsense and the fact that this Flanimal is basically just called Hello, thanks a lot for getting to the end of the video. Like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Apologies if there's hair on my face, I had a haircut today. Still on the sofa, but that should change by next video. Finished the Flanimal series, all good, loved it. I'm going to be moving on to something different as well, I don't want to say filler, because I like doing these ones, the quick videos to do in between the movies and the proper books. So yeah, stay tuned for that.